we, the people of Uganda, recalling our history that has been characterized by political and constitutional instability, recognizing our struggles against the forces of tyranny, oppression, and exploitation are the opening words in the preamble of the 1995 Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. Many schools of thought have argued that this particular preamble forms the basic structure doctrine of our laws. But they shall focus on Chapter 4, the Bill of Rights, and the mischief behind this particular very good legislation. But of course, we shall also look at, the International Convention Against Torture, our own Anti-Torture Act, the International Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, the Maputo Protocol on the Rights of Women, amongst other so many legislations around the rights of people in this country. And to put this into perspective is a panel of immaculate senior citizens of this country. It is now my honor to introduce to you this afternoon a person who has been missing on the show. He has been missing in action for some weeks now, but he's back, and we hope that he's back with a bang. That is retired Major Awich Pollar, who is the Director of External Relations at the NRM Secretariat, and also doubles as acting in capacity of the Legal Director. Retired Major, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Greetings to our viewers.
Yes, then our resident panelist, if I'm to say, Dr. Sarah Bireete, who is the Executive Director of Center for Constitutional Governance. Doctor, it's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Moses, and good afternoon, viewers.
Yes, next to myself and our visitor today is Ruth Ssekindi from Uganda Human Rights Commission. Ruth, thank you for...
I greet you all. I hope you are fine today. And those who are not well, I wish you a quick recovery.
Okay, thank you. Let me just start with you, Ruth, for obvious reasons. Article 51 of the Constitution establishes the Human Rights Commission and gives you so many powers therein under Article 51. But when we look at what is happening in the country, just this week, media was awash with images of a young man who had been, allegedly tortured, but also there are many other incidents in the past that we have seen, the likes of Kakwenza, and many other Ugandans who have come out to allege that have been tortured in the hands of state operatives. I don't know, as someone who works at the commission, how do you perceive all these happenings?
It's unfortunate that human rights violations still exist, blatant human rights violation. But I'll go back to the establishment of the commission. The Uganda Human Rights Commission, as you have said, is a constitutional establishment. It's established by the Constitution. And if you look at that Constitution, it's the institution with the widest mandate amongst all government or constitutional bodies. Wider than the DPP or IIGG or Equal Opportunities Commission or any other. And it's also one of the institutions with the biggest powers, including powers of court. There's no other institution that has that. Now, when the Constitution gives an institution those powers, the expectations are high. The expectations are high because you are given this mandate to protect and promote human rights in the country. And human rights is everything. It is the children, it is the water you drink, it is the food you eat, it is your security, it is issues of governance, it is elections, it is children, women, persons with disabilities, ethnic minorities. It is every aspect in life.
Yeah.
Now, with an institution that has this wide mandate, you would expect that it's adequately funded. It has all the amenities and the tools of trade that requires to do its job. But it's also a fact that the primary duty bearer in regard to human rights is the state. Mm-hmm. And so many times we turn to the institution, and I'm not running away from this, but we turn to the institution that is a watchdog and an accountability institution, but we fail to look at the primary duty bearer, the state, to ensure the observance of human rights. So when we are speaking about human rights, what is the state doing to ensure that every Ugandan is protected? Every Ugandan is treated with dignity. Every Ugandan has the entitlements that they require. Every child is going to school. Every person can afford free health services and free health care. no Ugandan goes hungry, and that the situation of Karamoja should never have happened. So when we are looking at human rights, we look at the primary duty bearer, and that is the state. And the state is made up of, you see, the three organs of government: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. But under them, there are ministries, departments, and agencies. And all these are created in fulfillment of human rights. If it is Ministry of Education, it's dealing with the right to education. If it is health, the right to health. If it is security, the right to personal liberty, security of the person, security of our national borders, and all that. So when we have instances of excesses, security excesses and violations, or it may not be security, it is unfortunate, and that is where, as a commission, we come out to ensure that the state is held accountable. But for how long are we going to do this? You have mentioned the Prevention and Prohibition of Torture Act. Uganda has the legal framework. We have the institutions in place. We have the accountability institutions. We have courts of law or courts of judicature. What is wrong? Why do we continue to have the same narrative that we had before the promulgation of this constitution? I think it is important for a day like this, the John and Loam Day, to reflect on where we're coming from and address the excesses so that we have a better future for ourselves and our children's children.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Retired Major, if you've critically heard what Ruth has said, the state bears the ultimate responsibility. And perhaps that is the social contract theory, that the state has with its people. You belong and you are a leader in this country's ruling political party. When you look at all these human rights violations, whether you choose to perceive them as allegations or those that have been proven, is this an indictment on the NRM government?
Is this an indictment on NRM government? Your question is clear. Thank you so much. But I also want to put a background to myself and to human rights in that I've always said that even when I talk as a party director, more so as a ruling party, I'm more actually a bigger percentage human rights person than the politician.
You're a human rights defender.
Yes, I'm a human rights defender. You may wish to know that human rights global is governed by the conventions. Then states domesticate those conventions. But of course, states also have in their respective constitutions. Now, at the global level, I have ever been a human rights judge, call it expert, for 2 terms. I've been elected by UN General Assembly in New York for 2 terms to serve on the treaty board in Geneva. And therefore, it is unimaginable for a UN expert of human rights who was voted by the 193 ambassadors in New York, taken to Geneva, and you reach along the way and abandon. So I'm more of human rights than the politician, because I've served as a treaty body expert. The kind of body that the Attorney General recently went to and faced some behaviors from some Ugandans, I was seated on the bench. So if I was still in Geneva, Attorney General would be appearing before me. And therefore, I feel much more a human rights person than a politician. So I take it so personal, issues of human rights. I would also like to comment that it's good sister is here. When I was in Geneva, the Uganda Human Rights Commission, which is under the National Human Rights Institutions, was accredited at grade A, which was a very high, the highest grade actually. And the grading is under what you call Paris principles. I hope they still maintain that. Otherwise, that would be an indictment, not to Uganda, but, well, maybe to Uganda, but also to the organization. Now, Article 44, we all know in the Constitution that is a no-go area. No-go area meaning you can't derogate from it. You can play, and that article does not include right to life, right to food, meaning that right to life, you can play around with it. A court of law, for example, can condemn somebody to death and will be hanged in Luzira. Article 44, you can't. This is freedom from slavery. Not even Museveni can say, Okello to Musime is my slave. No. Freedom from torture. Let me not go to torture now.
But it's there.
Yeah, no, I want to put it in my order of priority. Habeas corpus. If your person is arrested, you can go to court and say, bring him here.
Dead or alive.
Right to be heard. You must hear the other side of the story. A court proceedings without hearing is a nullity. In fact, I always advise that even among your children, when a child accuses the other of doing something wrong or beating her, you should even hear the other child first. Then the last one is freedom from torture. In the past, if Okello stole chicken and is taken to the magistrate's court in the village, the magistrate had the power to order 10 canes, and they would bring the scurry of the sub-county, we call it Gwangwena, to administer the cane in the court, but now not more. Now, these are areas that we know it is a no-go area, and we should abide by it. Now, how then does it feel? And that goes to your question of an indictment. It is an indictment if it is proven that it is being practiced. Because under no circumstance should we. For us as a party, when we get to manifesto, we put it under governance. We promise our voters that when you elect us, we shall provide under governance rule of law protection from all sorts of human rights violations. And therefore, you know that we have a social contract with the people. As a party, we win election. Then we form government. Government is simply an agent of the party. We are the principal. And we have been very strict on government agencies to respect human rights. And that's why we even passed a law, some time back, a law on personal liability. If you torture, you're not going to argue the defense of Attorney General. You must be responsible. So that is the position of the party and position of the government. And if it is so happens that we see, it is unfortunate, we condemn it in its worst form. Now, recently in Tare Sita in Ombara, President Museveni was very categorical to the armed forces that we fought the other army because of their bad behaviors. If you continue, you want the army, if you do something against, especially was referring to the torture on the people will hate you. He said it. He warned the army. Now, what matters as a routine now, what is now at issue is the validation of the claims that happens. Somebody stands up and said 5,000 people were disappeared, or so and so is tortured. We need to verify the claims. And once the claims are verified, we need to be stronger on the discipline and the engagement terms of our forces, or our duty bearers, as we said it. But so it is an indictment. We condemn it in its totality.
Okay. Beyond condemning, is there action taken against those who you investigate and find out they have actually participated in torturing citizens?
Yes, there are many examples to do. In fact, at times we even have a higher bar in the handling than what international community
Can you just mention for us some officers who have been...
For example, an officer during a riot arrested some people, took them to Wandegea police. From the counter to the detention room, we don't know what happened to his head. He shot him dead. That one interfered with the right to life. He was sentenced by court-martial to death. A similar one happened in Rubaga. In the course of riot, he chased some people to a garage where they repair cars. He got them there, shot them. Actually, 2. He equally was sentenced to death. Now, I got this information because there was a time we were being pressurized by European Parliament in Brussels, and we needed to prove procedures that we do. And that's why I was saying that we even have an higher bar because the Europeans don't have death sentence. For us, actually, we would prefer a firing squad. And there are several others that have happened up country. In Alepton, which resulted in the firing squad. So we have taken several steps. But I can agree with you, a lot more have to be done. We even have a higher bar. The higher bar in that we put them to firing squad. But they said, no, that is too much. Then you said, okay, Lozira. Even in Luzira, our friends from the West said, no, no death sentence. So we are really serious on it.
Okay, let me hear from Dr. Sarah. Sarah, Uganda is part of the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. And I think that is quite eminent in our multi-party dispensation, which is actually a constitutional provision. But how do we perceive the right to civil and political participation vis-a-vis the most recent case of the Honorable Muhammad Segirinya and the Honorable Alan Sewanyana, who people outside there have argued that this has been part of political persecution. So as we evaluate human rights in totality, let's put a lens into civil and political rights. Is there freedom of association in terms of political participation? You know, but also when political players find themselves on the other side of the law, is Article 44 on the right of free and fair and speedy trial, is it preserved? But basically, how do you analyze political and civil rights in this country?
Moses, before I come to that, we all know that this is a week of celebrating the life of Archbishop John Rome.
Yeah.
John Rome was murdered after he delivered a protest to President Idi Amin against three things: torture, killings, kidnapping of citizens, or forced disappearances. I have listened to President Museveni's speech. First of all, it's extremely embarrassing that the same government that is practicing the acts that led to the torture and killing of Archbishop John Rome and two others, torture, kidnaps, extrajudicial killings, is the one, engaged in grand posturing, celebrating the life of John Rome. If today Archbishop Kazimba, in a resolved manner, sent the same protest to President Museveni on torture, killings, and kidnaps, which is presiding of, what would be his action? And why do we take to the higher moral podium?
Hasn't Kazimba Mugalu condemned torture before and kidnaps?
Yes, and he's free.
I'm saying he delivered a protest note. Remember that we do not have even freedom to protest, and you ask him about civil and political rights. Archbishop John Rome delivered a protest note telling Idi Amin, stop kidnaps, stop torture, stop killings. Kazimba might talk about kidnaps, but in a very casual manner, because I am not even aware. We have been asking the Interreligious Council of Uganda to take a firm stand. They are eager to, and I will say what has carried that day, homosexuality. They are aggressively against homosexuality. Maybe rightly so, but I wish the same energy was used against torture. So the weight the Church of Uganda is throwing against homosexuality is the kind of weight Archbishop Rome, and even more, he threw for human rights. So you can't say that. So you have, I'm sure we have all seen their statements everywhere. But if I asked you for a statement on torture, you would only refer to a verbal statement. There is nothing written. But when they take a stand, we all know what they do. All churches in Uganda, they send a pastorate. They issue a statement. They address a press conference. So that is the kind of thing I would want to see the Church of Uganda doing if they are genuinely celebrating the life of John Rome. Because we are faced with the same situation that led to the killing of John Rome today. Then what is absurd for me is the grand posturing of government. John Rome is a hero. If he's a hero, why are you torturing people today? If he's a hero, why are you putting the hot flat iron on people's chest? If he's a hero, why do you descend on Ugandan children on Kampala streets and kill them in extrajudicial manner? What is there to show that this country is celebrating the life of John Rum? Beyond the cheap talk. The English say talk is cheap. And indeed, if you want to see a witness of that, look at the posturing on John Rum Day. And Ugandans should start demonstrations on that day. Because the issues that led to the killing of John Rum are what we are dealing with today. Very unfortunately. So if you want to see the state of civil and political rights, you don't need to look far. Today in the news, the police is telling the army to hand over the abducted people. I know that for the longest time, everybody denies responsibility of abducting Ugandans. In my lifetime, I have known 3 entities that abduct people. Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, Konye, at 45 have added another government of Uganda. Very unfortunately, I do not know any other government that abducts its people. There is denial of responsibility. But as I have always said, pregnancy cannot be hidden with hands. The few former abducted people who have resurfaced today have all been charged in a military court martial. Meaning that UPDF is abducting Ugandans. We are not going to sugarcoat this. If people have been abducted, you all deny responsibility, like the UPDF spokesperson is doing. Where do you get them to charge them in military court martial? Where do you find them?
Those are arrested, not abducted.
Where do you find them? He will have his time to respond. Former abducted people have resurfaced in the military court martial. That incriminates UPDF. There is one person who was abducted and later dumped at Makinde court, charged with destroying a drone by belonging to a soldier, which abducted him. Shamelessly, you abduct somebody, you charge a numberless drone, you charge them. I'm going to get details. I will say them in my next chance to talk of that. Charged with destroying the drone that abducted him. Shamelessly. Just a few days ago, we saw the UPDF spokesperson saying, I have searched all entities. We don't know this person whose chest was ironed with a hot flat iron. That can mean 3 things. 1, that government of Uganda has failed their priority responsibility to protect citizens. They have failed and they cannot account for people. Once a government, any government worth its name, has a primary duty of protecting its people. So the more you continue to deceive people that you don't know who is kidnapping them, you are demonstrating failure to protect as a government. And that is worse than looking in the mirror and facing the man in the mirror where it is UPDF kidnapping people. Failure to protect is worse. And citizens should demand for the resignation of the president if you have no capacity to protect the citizens. The second meaning of that statement is that maybe we have a rebel group or a group of criminal elements who are kidnapping and torturing people, and our hands are clean. Whenever a rebel group emerges in any democratic country, government makes a statement in parliament and briefs the country. So if you don't know, these criminals ironing the chest of Ugandans, can you make a statement in parliament that we are under a rebel attack and citizens are on their own? The third issue is a direct failure of command by the president. The president is a commander-in-chief of the UPDF and the head of all security agencies. He has a duty to promote, punish, demote, dismiss rogue elements in the security agencies. Over time, he has been promoting people who engage in human rights violations, especially while you're campaigning for him. He rewards them with promotion.
Can you substantiate that?
I will substantiate.
When?
Just wait. I said I will share all details of what I'm talking about in my second token. He promotes people. You are seen beating people. Like we saw in Massacre, this rogue element, Brigadier Sandy, openly walking and terrorizing people in open campaigns. Has he ever been punished? So, it's a failure of command. If you say there are elements in UPDF kidnapping, torturing Ugandans, and you as a command-in-chief, you are comfortably seated in your office, you have failed in your duties.
Okay, fair enough. Ruth, let me get to you. Your commission has quasi-judicial powers. My question is two. One, which is, have you put into force your powers to carry out investigations, to go as far as issuing judgments? That is one. Two is with the closure of the United Nations Human Rights Commission office here in Kampala, you earlier on mentioned issues around budgeting, issues around your capacity. So how does the closure of this particular office in Kampala, how would you anticipate it to affect your operations? But also, does it offer double jeopardy to the already bad human rights situation in Uganda?
Okay, thank you. The Commission has the mandate to receive, investigate matters of human rights violations and offer redress to victims. And that is something we do already at the tribunal. On at least every year, we get over 800 cases reported. And currently, before the tribunal, there are over 1,000 cases. And the tribunal has already commenced. And last week, they were in Gulu. And then next week, they'll go through all our regional offices. But the people who report to the Uganda Human Rights Commission do not reflect the violations that may be out there. And while many may report, many do not report. So that is why when it comes to the observance of human rights and protection of human rights, it is the duty of all organs of government and every accountability institution to join the synergies and support the cause of human rights. Why? Police has a role to have oversight mechanisms within the police force to avoid excesses. When you do that, you limit the levels of violations of human rights. The military has a Directorate of Human Rights. They also should have internal mechanisms to address violations by their officers so that we do not see excesses, issues of torture. You can prevail over your institution because why have a bad name when you can address certain aspects internally? We also know that if it's about obtaining evidence, no evidence obtained as a result of torture is admissible in courts of law. So why then do you torture and spoil a good case that you may have? If this person is a criminal, that evidence that you can obtain as a result of torture can never be admitted.
Admissible, yeah.
In any case, it will be used against the person who has actually violated, that is the perpetrator. That evidence can only be used against the perpetrator to prove that actually he tortured the other person to get this information. So we've been trying to tell security agencies that there is no situation in which you use that information or that evidence. You can actually invest a lot in adequate investigations. Use ballistic experts, use expert information, use lie detectors, but do not subject someone to inhuman and degrading situations, because torture does not only affect the physical, that you have a wound or a lashing. When you torture someone and you violate their rights, you have violated the rights of their children, their mother who maybe get a stroke, the father, and everyone, including the children.
Yeah.
And it goes to, it goes to the emotional aspect and the psychological, it has psychological effects. So much so that some of these people never recover for life. You see them, but actually they are partially insane. So when we say that torture is is very heinous, we actually mean it. You may think that, he received a lashing, he received a few bans, but it does not stop there.
It has far-reaching implications.
It has far-reaching effects, and it affects them for the rest of their lives. So as a commission, we have continued to investigate. We've continued to receive complaints of human rights violations, but I wish we were adequately funded to be able to expedite these matters as soon as possible. Because justice delayed is justice denied. We have had periods of over a year when we do not, or even 2, when we do not have members of the commission. What happens? It impacts on the ordinary person. Remember, the people who report to us are indigent people. They're usually poor because the rich can afford can afford to get a good lawyer and run to courts of law, and they have done so. Those who have afforded, we've seen courts of law give 100 million to victims of torture. But what about this man who cannot even afford 100,000? They rely on the commission to even pay for their transport refund to be able to come and lodge a complaint. Now, when you do not adequately facilitate this institution, that means you've crippled everyone, and you're affecting the poorest of the poor in society. So,
how does that inadequacy relate to the now closure?
Yes, that's where I'm coming to. So now we realize that we have been depending and leaning on to the Office of the High Commission. The Office of the High Commission office has been one of our biggest supporter, our biggest ally, and in the protection and promotion of human rights. They have helped us train security agencies, including CMI, ISO, UPDF. They have supported Ministry of Foreign Affairs in treaty body reporting. That is the state's obligation, to report to international human rights mechanisms. They supported us when when we are reviewing bills. They have supported this country in regard to line ministries, including EOC, Ministry of Gender, coming up with a National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. If you have an institution like this that is not only bringing its expertise, but is investing and also bringing a resource to Uganda, you should be looking at the economic aspect. You should be looking at how many Ugandans are employed and what are the benefits. What are the benefits of this institution staying in the country when we as state agency or state institutions are benefiting greatly from this institution, and we're saying, no, we don't need it. For us as a commission, we have said we need this institution. It complements the work of the NHRI. It supports us in our strengthening of our work. It has helped in training our officers, even addressing regional and international human rights situations or mechanisms. So that is why we have called on reconsideration of this decision. If it is possible, let the state reconsider and have this office, because we have a lot more to benefit than to lose.
Yeah, just Ruth, in an attempt to build confidence in the commission, because we all know that your commission is an administrative body, and it's important that the public has confidence in this institution. So you mentioned that you have been conducting trials and you've been conducting all these things, but do you actually go ahead to convict, or you only? How far have you gone? And maybe you could cite for us examples so that we feel much more confident that this commission is actually doing what they are set out to do.
Well, we are not a criminal tribunal that we convict. No, we do not.
Body.
Yeah. So when we have our tribunal really handles matters.
Reparations.
Yes.
Reparations.
But what we do, in most of our cases, we order compensation, and if we know of the perpetrator individually, we write to the DPP and request that they institute a criminal action, so that then this person is tried under the PPTA, and the criminal action goes after him. Now, previously, we noted that before we had the Prevention and Prohibition of Torture Act, we noted that government security agencies used to hide under the principle of vicarious liability. The master is liable for the acts of his servant. And so you have so many cases, and the government would pay out compensation to victims. And instead, these people are transferred or transferred to another station, or even promoted. And we said this has to stop. That is why it was very important for Uganda to criminalize torture, because what we had was grievous bodily harm or assault. You understand? Despite the fact that someone has been beaten to pulp or whatever has happened, but you have no criminal legislation under which, or criminal offense under which you can convict this person. So the fact that we have the PPTA, that is why we have called on civil society and even individuals to bring criminal actions against perpetrators of torture. So as a commission, we receive these cases, but we usually go against the Attorney General. Why? Because many cases when people are tortured, they do not know the individual. And it is so hard for the ordinary person to fight the state. The state is a very powerful machinery, which you can't easily fight. So these accountability NHRIs help to bridge the gap between the powerful and the powerless. And that is where the commission comes in. So when we bring a case and we sue the Attorney General, then the Attorney General also asks the DPP to bring a civil criminal action against this one. But then we ensure that the state pays this person for the violation of the rights of, because this person is an agent of the state. So they come in that capacity.
Well, thank you. Retired Major,
Maybe
two issues for me.
just a little minute. I was asked to substantiate my comments. One is the bodyguard who was charged with destroying a drone that kidnapped him is a Bobi Wine's bodyguard who went missing for 30 days after he was kidnapped from, he's called Kavuma Jamshid, one of Bobi Wine's bodyguard. He went missing for 32 days. And he was later dumped at Old Kampala police station with a charge of malicious destruction of property, where it is alleged that he destroyed the side mirrors of a drone that kidnapped him. And its number plate is UBG 160X, belonging to Kopolo Kamale Nelson. This is a court case in Makinde. You abduct somebody in a drone, they are missing for 32 days, you charge them with destroying a drone that kidnapped them. I also mentioned the Brigadier Sunday among the impunity in police, especially those campaigning for President Museveni. But there's also a Lieutenant Colonel who drove a vehicle in Besigye's rally in Mukono in 2001 and killed people, and he was promoted. He was never punished.
Okay, let's hear from
Those are just a few examples.
Okay.
No, I said those are few examples of the impunity.
Retired Major, two concerns for me. One are the accusations or allegations of civilians being tried in military court. That is one. Two is that does the closure of the United Nations Human Rights Commission, is it an indication of government is deteriorating interest on issues of human rights? Or you want to substantiate what that particular communique says, that civil society has built capacity to now monitor government human rights issues and things like that?
Okay, first let me comment about what Sarah had said earlier. Sarah talks of extrajudicial killings. I'm not aware that the current challenges that we have demonstrate to a big extent or to any small extent extrajudicial killings. The extrajudicial killing that is comparing with the scenario of Loom is where we used to get dead bodies in this forest, which is now industrial park. This one near Coca-Cola here on Ginger Road. What is the name of that forest? Namave. Where we would get people on River Nile being eaten by crocodile. Now that was the manifestly clear case of extrajudicial killing. So I don't want our viewers and the world to be misled into thinking that at the moment Uganda has really cases of extrajudicial killing. Torture, yes, we have seen manifestation. So I want to make that clarification that we have not reached that stage and we wouldn't like to reach it. The other thing is that we seem also not to be clear about the borderline between abductions and arrest. The case of the bodyguard of Bobi Wine that Sarah is citing, actually the number of the car is there, the number plate, she has mentioned it. So we should differentiate between arrest and abduction, and the clear English definitions are there. So if every arrested person we term it abduction, then we are doing it in bad faith.
So
we can go further
the
to
drones
say,
don't exist. The numberless drones don't exist according
but
to
the one you cited had number place.
This is for damaging
You have
the
always
road.
told me to wait for my chance. You don't want to wait for yours.
Okay, first
Now,
say your lies. Okay.
The truth. So we should demarcate the difference between arrest and abduction. The state has power of arrest, and they will continue to arrest for the goodness of the society, because these are people who violate rights of others. So not every arrest is abduction. We may be closed down to see if an arrest is made. We should, as a state, be clear about procedural criminal justice procedures, which are provided under the law, including police bond, including production in court, including bail there too. But we cannot say no arrest has been made. So we sometimes blanket arrest and call it abductions, which is wrong. Now, the other clear conversation that we in the party and government are having is terms of engagement of our security officers. Because security officers, when they are deployed, they have terms of engagement. We still think it is in the conversation level that arresting officers should be clearly marked and known. Because if you don't, how then shall we know if unidentified rogue elements also arrest on the street of Kampala? Because the genuine legitimate state agents also arrested the other day without identification. So this is a conversation that we are having so that the terms of engagement of our security officers are clear. When arrest is made, we know who was arrested. Otherwise, if we don't do that, then we risk a situation that Sarah is saying there's no command, there's no coordination and all this. And I think that will soon come to be resolved. That clear terms of engagement in this kind of operation so that states are made, because states have the mandate to arrest. They have the power. So they should arrest, but make it clear. So those terms of engagement should be made clear, and it is in the conversation. Now, the trials of civilian in courts, in court martial, we discussed this thing some time back. What was on the table was various legal interpretations. Some people say service offenses which are clearly marked out under the law entitle the court to charge somebody. For example, in possession of military stores and all that. But I think courts have, some people believe that some courts have made pronouncement against such provision or of its illegality or unconstitutionality. So I think what is happening now, we are not sure whether there's an appeal by an Attorney General against that pronouncement. So if there's an appeal, somebody would say, we still take the current state ruling. But I think the unclarity there about charging people in court is the various interpretations of that provisions. And I think unity should come out clear. If, for example, somebody argues that if the Constitutional Court has made the pronouncement and the Supreme Court has not overturned it, that is the status quo, then let it be clear. But I think the confusion that has happened so far is not in bad faith that the government want to deliberately disrespect the court opinion or position of the law. What is happening is that there's a genuine, either you call it misinterpretation or interpretation of the laws as it is. But as I said again, it will soon be settled and we shall know whether or not civilians should be tried in court martials. So it is work in progress and it will soon be sorted out, either by way of a pronouncement of Supreme Court or by way of interpretation of this provision to our actors. For example, we have often called the National Security Council members, which is the highest security body, and interpreted to them, for example, POMA. We called the Attorney General and said, these are the security agents. Can you interpret for them the law? Because they seem not to, because we are hearing lots of complaints. So equally, this can be addressed. On the Office of the High Commission for Human Rights, I already told you that I've been elected by the world 2 terms, each term of 4 years, and I've lived in the office of the High Commission for Human Rights for 8 years in Geneva. So I feel passionate about their presence and more passionate about their absence. What now hampers me is that I don't have the facts about the closure. If we go by what was issued, the statement that you say, then it needs closer scrutiny. But I do think that it is not bad to revisit the closure and have it discussed. For example, there was a time a matter came up about, because these bodies are established as by MOU by government of Uganda when they come in the country, before they are accredited position to operate, before an accreditation is made for them. Some of the conditions, for example, includes that the money that comes, the government in the MOU says this amount should remain Uganda. How? By the number of local staff that you employ and other things which are clearly mentioned. My view is that if there is a violation to that, it can be discussed. It wouldn't amount to a closure. So we could sit down and discuss provision by provision. So I don't know whether in this closure a fair hearing was given to them. But as I said, I don't have the facts about the closure. But all I can know is that the way government operates, the way our party operates, if there are sections that feel that it should be, including me, it should be redressed, should be retabled and rediscussed and issues addressed one by one. For example, the issue I've given that if the MOU says you bring $5 million in Uganda, the MOU says this amount should remain by way of how many local staff do you employ and all that and all this. That can be discussed. But since I don't have the facts, maybe Foreign Affairs and Attorney General did this due diligence, which I'm not aware. But the presence of the Office of the High Commission for Human Rights is very good, as he has explained. I would personally wish to have them. And if they are in violations, I would really engage them and try to make sure that those violations on their part, because they can also be a violator in the terms of the MOU that led to their accreditation in Uganda.
Okay, fair enough. Dr. Sarah, as you respond to some of the comments made by a retired major, my question is that when you look at the letter of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs closing this particular body, is that they say that civil society, where part of which you belong, has built capacity to actually monitor government and to supervise and hold government accountable on issues of human rights. How do you evaluate the capacity of civil society generally?
They are developed. That's why she's here.
Interesting.
Moses, I found out which has a difficult job. You see, human rights have no color, have no political belonging. Human rights are for all of us. And anybody can fall a victim. Although now the witch hunt is against UNUP supporters, NRA members can fall victim of human rights violations. So I would not expect so much haggling to make a human rights debate a political or one-sided debate, because we are all human. Human rights affect all. Violations of human rights affect all of us. You know that if anybody is a Christian, the Bible says the greatest commandment. There are two great commandments, and then the second one is love your neighbor as you love yourself. If at times I see, leaders in NRM, I don't want to call it pretending, because really we are all sinners, but posturing to be Christians. So do they love their neighbor as they love themselves? And what do you do to a person you love? Do you put a hot flat iron on their chest? Do you cut off their limbs? Do you make them stay in rooms with the dead bodies so that to show them that they are next? Or the torture. By the way, if we were to document what torture victims go through in this country, I know that we have had torture over a long time. The likes of Manenero died in CMI custody in 2001 after torture. So torture is nothing new to NRM. I know that NRM likes posturing, that they went to the bush to fight human rights violations. But we can list elements of torture. They are as old as NRM in power. Manenero was killed in CMI custody in 2001. These are 20 years ago. Tortured. The same CMI operatives are still torturing people. They've just intensified. They just have so many victims. So as to whether President Museveni can protect, or whether he takes his responsibility to protect as a president seriously, I doubt. It's as if for him, so long as you don't support NRM, then you have no human rights.
Civil capacity development.
Are you the moderator?
I'm waiting for it.
So, when you look at the whatever sugarcoat that can be there, actions speak louder than words. And my message to Ugandans is clear. Do not listen to anybody's cheap talk, whether it's the president. Well, ask for answers on the responsibility to protect. And any government that fails to protect citizens with their lives, to protect the sovereign, to protect sovereignty, then you have no business being in power. We know how genocide developed in Rwanda. I know that people are shy to talk about it today. But once you have a deliberate aim to exterminate supporters of Bobi Wine, that is a root. That is how genocide grows. It is a matter of how many shall fall victims. As to whether we have genocidal tendencies in this country, as to whether we have a political agenda to eliminate political supporters of one group, it is no longer a question today.
Can you also add the possibility of this being terrorist attacks?
By who?
To undermine the state?
By who?
I don't know. There are so many terror groups who have come out to, confidently acknowledge.
And this one is unknown.
ISIS came out to, to take responsibility.
When ADF recently attacked people at Parliamentary Avenue, did we go under guesswork? Did we speak with a tongue-tied, mouth about it? When terrorists Al-Shabaab attacked people watching World Cup finals, did we speak with a tongue tie? So, why does government have a tongue tie on kidnaps? Who is responsible? Are they in charge or not?
So, in your own view, terror groups cannot be part of this?
We have had terror groups, Moses. It's not new that, Al-Shabaab used to attack us. There were times of even throwing bombs in Kabaragara. The likes of General Tumkunde will tell you they fought those terror attacks. We had a Al-Shabaab attack during the World Cup finals. It was very clear.
Because terror groups have also evolved.
No, I'm coming, Moses.
They are much more difficult to trace. They are more...
Recently, the most recent attack was on Parliamentary Avenue by ADF. Nobody had their tongue tied when they were speaking about it. Second issue is that we have security with proper equipment, proper training, very educated people. Sometimes you can forgive for having been an illiterate president. This time around, the excuse of illiteracy does not apply to the likes of Afanda Awich. He has told you, he's a lawyer, highly trained, highly qualified, human rights defender, but his tongue is tied.
No, I tell the truth.
The former CDF, who is the Minister of Internal Affairs, has a master's in law. The former IGP, who was at the height of abusing people's rights, had a master's in human rights. So the excuse of illiteracy does not apply to NRM. They are simply rogue. They are criminals. And they know what they are doing. It is criminal. They are doing it with no repercussions. And that's what takes to the responsibility to the president. So when I come to the civil society question, since 2011, we had a break-ins of NGOs working on human rights, a total of 42 that we have documented. There is no single report as to who broke into those NGOs. Even where footage of CCTV cameras was availed, police has never arrested anyone. It has never produced any single report. In 2017, we had an attack, physical siege of leading NGOs in the country, ActionAid, Uhuru Institute, Greece, sieged by military and materials confiscated. Some of the properties, Godba would have been on this show. He has never got his properties from the siege in 2017, from police. Accounts frozen. It had to take court action to unfreeze their accounts. Accounts of both the officers and the staff frozen. And no question, no justification was ever given. In 2021, in the build-up to observing elections as civil society, 3 accounts of the biggest civil society networks engaged in coordinating election observation, led by NGO Forum, Uganda Women's Network, Alliance for Campaign Finance Monitoring. Accounts frozen with no question or justification. There were allegations that the funds then that were coming from DGF for observing elections, that it was aiding terrorists. You have been looking for terror attacks. So it was funding terrorist activities. The NGOs went to court and said, fine, if we are terrorists, can you charge us? No single arrest, nothing. Until the NGOs won. And the court has declared that the Financial Intelligence Authority cannot be used as a monster without justification on freezing people's accounts. Away from that, 28 CSO actors were arrested immediately after we issued the first statement for observing elections for which we were accredited to observe. And maybe it's important for the viewers to note that human rights, the UN has added election observers on the list of human rights defenders because they defend the political rights of the people to participate in choosing their government. They were meant to report, held in custody for 3 nights, meant to report for 6 months, no charge. Police was investigated. So that's the capacity of civil society you're looking at. After elections, so this is the environment. And I want you to show me where the capacity is.
Can you broaden your analysis to, because what I understand is civil society is not just NGOs, all right? There are the labor unions.
I am first explaining the sector where,
religious institutions.
Let me explain a sector where it belongs.
Your sector
Which
could be
religious
defunct.
institution is defending
Your
human
sector
rights?
could be defunct, as you're ably explaining to us. But like I said, civil society is broad. Maybe the churches are actually out there advocating. You know, maybe the cultural institutions are actually there working. Maybe the labor unions are actually there. So can you make it a broad-based analysis?
Let me finish with the sector I understand.
Okay.
After I will ask you, because you're a student at Makerere, can you have this debate in Makerere today? And then you will tell me whether academia has capacity to fill the gaps of a sieged NGO sector. So, also in the build-up to elections, the DGF was suspended. And this was the facility supporting not only Human Rights Commission and other government actors, they were supporting 80% of civil society work in this country. Suspended for 16 months, and later it is no more. So that is now in the past. So you have a funding base of 80% of civil society work cut out in the country. So we had the suspension of 54 NGOs with no due process. Whether they were right or wrong, the principles of natural justice are clear. And the NGO Act and regulations lay out procedures for due process, not followed. So this is the NGO sector, which has been doing the bulk of monitoring, promoting human rights in Uganda, together with other actors. When you go to the broader civil society, the teachers' union, they have failed to defend the discrimination that has thrown schools in disarray. I am a member of PTA in some school. I saw Parliament attempting to debate fees increment, pretending not to know the chaos they've thrown schools into through discriminatory payments of science teachers against arts teachers. My school had to put an increment of 600,000 to try to create a balance at least halfway between arts and science teachers, because the schools are ungovernable. You have one class of teachers earning 4 million. You have another class of teachers earning 1 million or less, and they are required to teach the same working hours. Isn't it common sense that you cannot run schools like that? I mean, really, what did Ugandans do to deserve such leaders? If you go to the medical association, you've seen recently the chaos. Do we even know who is the leader of the union? Do we know today the leader of the medical union? So what civil society are you talking about?
Can I say something? Just
Yeah, sure. As we take a short commercial break.
The question that you asked Sarah, which I believe she has not answered, is because government argues that civil society has developed capacity.
Yes.
I would like to associate and try to answer that indeed civil society has developed capacity. How? You know, under the Act, civil societies who are
Which
registered, NGO Act,
So you are looking at NGOs.
they routinely report to government. And in this process, government is able to assess their capacity human resource in an organization. How much have they done training? How big is the organization? The coverage nationally, and also the routine funding per year. So in this case, in this way, government is able to know that NGOs have developed capacity because they do make routine report, annual report. It is a violation of the law if you don't. So in this way, government is able to know that NGOs have either enough qualified personnel, because you show the source of your funding. They know that they have the funding, because if funding has been routinely for 5 years, you can guess where it is coming from. So it is easy to study the capacity of NGO and see whether they can act independently. So that is what government says. We have studied the capacity of NGOs through their annual return that they report to us. Because if you look at the reporting procedures to government, it's so detailed and so clear. That is why government says we have NGOs who have developed and they know the subject matter. For example, the laws, the conventions, the statutes, everything. So government is able to know and say NGOs have developed capacity.
Okay, we are due for a short commercial break. But thank you for making a date with us this afternoon. Keep it with us and see you shortly after this break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
We'll be back from that short commercial break. We shall just pick it up from where we stopped. And Ruth, let me begin with you. There is a narrative out there that perhaps needs substantiation, but there's a belief that the independence of the commission is one that needs to be questioned and interrogated. And if this is true, then perhaps their accusations could be right. Because if you look at the mode of appointment of the commissioners, it is much more like an executive endeavor. So in your own honest opinion, do you think that the commission is entirely independent? But also, as you do this, evaluate for us the mode of appointment of commissioners. Is it leaning towards one arm of government? And if so, does that particular provision of the law jeopardize the independence of the institution?
Okay. When NHRIs are working, they are guided by what we call the Paris principles. These are principles relating to the operations of national human rights institutions. And these Paris principles apply to all NHRIs, let me call them national human rights institutions, everywhere in the world. Now, it is a requirement for NHRIs to be independent. There is the requirement of pluralism, autonomy. They should have a wide mandate. It's a requirement that these institutions should be adequately funded, and they should be able to receive, investigate, monitor matters of human rights in every state. Now, the Paris Principles guide on how these NHRIs should operate. Now, one of the principles is independence, pluralism, and autonomy. And in Uganda, the method of appointment is that the Ministry of Justice consults communities and identifies persons who are befitting to be members of the commission, as well as the chairperson, who should be at the level of a High Court judge. And these names are produced before His Excellency the President, who appoints, and they are sent then to Parliament for vetting to determine whether they are fit and proper persons or befitting to hold these offices as members. Now, when we question the independence of the Commission, the question is, have we or has the Commission acted in such a way where their independence is questionable? I do not know. I think you're best placed to tell me that. But in all our operations, and I can tell you that I've been in the Commission for a very long time, call it 18 years. And never at any one time have I received, and before I'm a director of monitoring inspections, and before that for 12 years, I was the director in charge of complaints, investigations, and legal services. Never during my career as a human rights lawyer have I seen, heard, or witnessed interference from any organ. And in fact, even if they did, I'm sure we would have rejected it. So by the time we attained the A status, we are evaluated on our independence and our autonomy and our mandate and how effective we are implementing this mandate. The Uganda Human Rights Commission is also currently the best, holding the position of best NHRI in Africa regionally. That means we must be doing something. But despite the fact that I can say we are independent, of course, people have questioned, oh no, you have been appointed by the president. But even judges, the process is also almost similar to that appointment of judges. And yet, they also remain, we presume, they also remain independent. But even though we can say we are an A-status institution, the best, we also have our challenges.
Yeah.
There's no institution that is perfect. And it is these challenges where I think the society has come up to question whether it is resources, where we have not reached everywhere, where we should. I am sure, and I can tell Ugandans that I think we can do more. But for purposes of performing our mandate in an independent way, we aspire to be independent, and we try to make sure we're independent. And I'm yet to see where we have been compromised. But when it comes to investigating complaints, monitoring the human rights situation, speaking and telling the truth, we do a good job. We try to aspire, because we also don't want to lose our status or our standing in society. But like I have said, we also have our challenges. We can do more. We need to do more. We know we have 24 offices around the country. It's one of those constitutional bodies that is really also bigger in scope and coverage. But this funding and the delays of appointment have also affected us as an institution.
Yeah, just a follow-up on that, because you cite the example of the judges. Even the mode of appointment of judicial officers has over time been a matter of contestation, that perhaps should we have more public involvement in it. So I don't think that citing the example of how judges of the High Court are appointed exactly vindicates you. But my question, just to wrap this up with you, is that would you have preferred, or would you recommend, a much more transparent or better means through which commissioners are appointed?
Yes, we are coming up with a law amendment of the Act, and those were some of the proposals we raised, because it's not the first time people have raised that, the appointment process. So it's one of those things that we have put out there, so that, even if you do your work perfect, but the perception impacts on, how people are confident in dealing with you, or the public trust, and you don't want to lose that because of the appointment processes. Those are some of the things we're trying to streamline.
Okay, thank you. Retired Major, the question of the three arms of government, to me, is very important, because as we discuss human rights, all these three arms of government have a role to play. The executive perhaps initiates policies, but also implements. The legislature is charged with the mandate of coming up with legislation and coming up with laws. Then the judiciary, of course, is to enforce and at times interpret, or even make law in itself. So the three arms of government have a critical role to play. So how would you evaluate the performance of each in terms of empowering and enforcing human rights? Well, knowing that the Constitutional Court, in a landmark decision of Charles Onyangobo, was clear on the right to freedom of expression. Not so long ago, our parliament enacted the Computer Misuse Act that was seen by many as curtailing the freedom of expression. So I don't know, are these three arms of government working? Because parliament enacts a law and the Constitutional Court overturns it. So are these three arms of government coordinating to ensure that the human rights are protected?
Yeah, they're doing it. They're doing it extremely well.
Because then how do you explain one arm enacting a law, the other overturning?
They're doing it. But permit me to add on what human rights person has said about whether or not they're independent. She has mentioned it all, but I just like to add that one ingredient that puts in impartiality is the oath that you take. That oath is not a small thing. When you take an oath and you are bound by it, it really comes from your heart and it is translated into your activity. Just like the judges, they take an oath and said, I'll do this. And I think the commissioners equally take oath, not so?
Yes, we do.
So they do take oath. So the oath that is taken is a very, very big ingredient which goes ahead to show impartiality. So when you take that oath, they know that the oath I've taken is not that I'm going to propagate NRM or I'm going for human rights. So I just wanted to add that ingredient. Now, on the three arms of government in protecting human rights, it's evident that they have tried their best. Maybe right away is that, you know, when you legislate, you think you have done the best thing in utmost good faith. But once you put a legislation to test in its operation, you start to see a crack. And it is not wrong that in the process of operation, judiciary comes to challenge it. That is the beauty of checks and balances. Some people would argue that the principle of the separation of powers is theoretical. That is for maybe academic reason, because if you look at it, the funding really comes from the executive, the appointment comes from the executive, and so much of that. So somebody may argue that the separation, and we learn it in schools, is for academic, for academic purposes. Does it work in reality? But the executive had initiated many, many laws that have been passed. And that's why we said, for example, bring in the element, you're the executive, you control police and the army, and you pass a law that should you go to arrest somebody, break the leg or break the testicle, you will be personally liable. That is the executive saying, and parliament passes it. So, and that is a good thing for the executive. It's mentioned earlier on institutions
The Human Rights Enforcement Act was a private member's bill.
It was even the PPTA.
But even if it is, in legislating a law, if the government said no, it can't pass. For example, you need a certificate of financial implication.
No, but it's important to give credit.
Once you get if the government does not give a certificate of financial implication, that bill won't pass. So even if you said it came from a private, but it has to meet, the executive have to give a nod. So we therefore said it has done it. So many other institutions has been put, Human Rights Commission itself, IGG, strengthening the CID, DPP, all these institutions and legislations are from the executive. So when it comes to the judiciary challenging it, it's the beauty of the separation. That should one arm seems to be acting ultra-vires, acting outside its mandates, the other one comes in. So for me, I don't find it a conflict that a piece of law is passed and a court rules against it. That is the beauty of. In fact, the way I wish the executive respects that. And we had mentioned in the issue of the court martial, we have mentioned it. So if executive proposes a law through cabinet paper and all that, and it goes to legislative, and then it is passed, because that is the route. That is a roadmap. From cabinet, the paper is prepared, presented to the line minister who presents it in cabinet, in a legislature. If the courts of law challenges it and it is respected, it's okay for me and it's okay for us. That's the beauty of the balances. And it is only on this that human rights will be respected. Because if in the best mind of the state or the executive, it is things that pass the provision, like the other one, the case you cited first, not this one of the MP for Kampala City Council. No. You cited two cases. The journalist case,
Charles Onyango.
the Charles Onyango. If you have such a provision, in the interest of the executive, you think you are passing a law that should bring harmony in society, that should protect individuals or protect any legal persons in society, you are acting in good faith. But then another body says, no, I think you didn't think right. If it is done, if the court opposes it and scraps it, that is the beauty of the separation. In other words, the law which would have actually been violating rights passed by the executive, the courts have seen it. So, plus funding that we are saying. So I believe that the executive has done its part in Of course, we have small resource envelope, and they will always be crying for resources. But the funding, the putting of institutions, initiating legislatures, or even supporting the private ones that Sarah was saying by giving certificate of no objection or certificate of compliance by the Minister of Finance and letting the law be passed, executive has tried. Parliament has also tried by passing those laws. They have tried. The courts have tried by either adjudicating using those laws, and in this case I'm talking of courts including human rights courts. They have tried to use those laws to protect their rights, which is a good thing, but also the Constitutional Court has tried to adjudicate and oppose or rule on matters that they think the laws are excessive. So for me, the three arms have done their part, and that is how human rights is being protected. Of course, as we always say, we need more, because even violations change form. The violations of last year may not be the violations this year, because these violators also have brains. For whatever reason that they do, they think they're doing something good for their work, but they also manifest. That's why we keep tying the laws, and we keep changing terms of engagements, and we keep passing regulations that must follow them. So we need to be on our heels, and we need to do much for the governance of human rights.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Sarah, the question of the rights of women, I think to me is very important. And Uganda is part of the Maputo Protocol of Mozambique, Article 33 on the rights of women, so we cannot argue regarding, okay, we may, but I think regarding legislation, it is there. But to me, it's a question of form versus substance. If you look at what is happening, the reality is that we still have teenage pregnancies, we still have high mortality rates, we still have the maternal health care infrastructure is still, wanting. So how would you evaluate the rights of women? But also knowing that we have transformed in a way that today we have a woman, I know this sounds cliche, but a woman serving as vice president, speaker of parliament, prime minister, and all these things, cabinet, I think is now 43% of women. So the rights of women generally, politically, socially, and economically.
Even on the panel, I'm the only man.
You're the man on the panel.
He's a moderator.
I'm a moderator. So this is a social aspect. Yeah, but the empowerment of women, is that where we say kudos to the NRM? Is that why we say kudos to the NRM? There is UWEP, Uganda Women Empowerment Fund, So I don't know, how is the NRM performing in terms of the rights of women?
We have been having a debate in the women movement of the need to go beyond the numbers. But before I go into that, I want to give a brief comment on the Human Rights Office in Uganda. The closure of the Human Rights Office in Uganda, really we saw it coming after the beating of journalists at the UN complex. I mean, which country does that? That was a clear message to government that we can deal with you, UN. Clear message. There was a stage-managed punishment of people with no or low ranks when the commander, who was pictured in an NTV video with a whip, very light-skinned. People were waiting to see the light skin in the people that were paraded. But there was only the extreme chocolate.
Is that the incident where General David Muhoozi came out to apologize to the country?
Yeah, but do people eat apologies? You see, when you are a duty bearer, you have work to do. You are not put in an office of responsibility to apologize or cry before the people. You either execute your mandate or resign, because you are not born there and you are not a tree. And there will be people before you in that office, there have been people before you, and there will be people after you. If you think you are overwhelmed, just get out. I wouldn't really to start recognizing apology of failures of duty bearers. They don't work. We are talking about lives here. Does an apology save a life? So when it comes to briefly the separation of powers, this country has experienced a governance where we had no separation of powers. And it's not an academic theory. Under President Idi Amin, we were ruled under decrees. There was only executive. I don't know whether courts were functional. I was too young. But I don't remember. Maybe Ruth will remind me. I don't remember the history of courts under Idi Amin. But I remember that we had no parliament and we are being governed under decrees. So the separation of powers is not an academic theory. It is a practical theory to say this is the work of the executive. And all your decisions are approved by parliament, including appointments of cabinet, are subject to the approval of parliament. And where there is a problem, then courts come in and adjudicate. It is not a theory. It is a practical arrangement of modern governance. But we have also lived the other side where there was no parliament in the country. So having said that, the rights of women, is it time to celebrate? Is it uhuru? I know that politically we have the numbers in parliament. We have the numbers in cabinet. Our constitution falls below the threshold of African Union and UN on gender parity. It still talks of a third women composition. Whereas at the time it was enacted, that looked like an achievement. We are lagging behind in terms of the times, in terms of the Article 16 of the African Union Constitutive Act on gender parity, in terms of Agenda 6, 8, and 9 for the African Union Agenda 2063, in terms of Sustainable Development Goals, I think it is SDG 15, and so many other instruments. So we could have run faster when we were children in 95. But as we age, we have realized you cannot now tell people that Uganda is a champion of gender rights when you have such archaic provisions of a third when the world has since moved on. That's why we do not rank highly anymore in terms of gender empowerment as a country. So we need to up our game, and it's not yet uhuru. Away from the political numbers, we have bigger challenges of general empowerment of women from the grassroots. So you have the cosmetic numbers of women at political level who have, even after 10 years of having a leader of parliament as a woman, she failed to enact the domestic relations bill. I want to borrow the words of Professor Mahmoud Mamdan while debating the bill, that if enacted, that law will create the greatest social revolution that has ever been in an African country. So you have women leadership in parliament, but because the women empowerment is cosmetic, they cannot even enact the basic law for empowerment of a grassroots woman. So to me, that is a demonstration of to what extent are the numbers speaking in terms of action. Total failure. If you look at these women, especially those women who are stuck on women's seats, I'm one of the advocates, and without apology, of term limits for affirmative action seats. Because the essence of affirmative action is to empower. And you cannot say that you need capacity building in perpetuity. Then you have failed to run. Even when you take a child to primary school, we know that it is 7 years. And you should prepare for secondary. If you take the child in secondary, you know that it is 6 years. And you are looking at tertiary education. So what is the running? What is the affirmation of the empowerment? When you have women, including powerful women like my favorite, Right Honorable Kidega, stuck on a woman affirmative seat. Empowerment in perpetuity? Is that what the framers of the Constitution aimed at? Or they aimed at empowering very many numbers of women into higher positions of responsibility who can serve in parliament, maybe graduate to genocides, or graduate to private sector, read big boards, read, or graduate to academia and read powerful institutions. Did they aim at that? That one person comes on an affirmative seat and dies there? So please. So I think I can stop there.
Thank you. Thank you. And Ruth, I'm sure you have a comment regarding the rights of women, but as you do that, enable us evaluate Uganda's compliance to international law, because like we have mentioned, it is public knowledge. Uganda has ratified so many international conventions, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Convention Against Torture. There are so many, all right? But what is our compliance level? That is one. Two, of course, I'll give you a chance to comment on the rights of women.
Okay, I'm glad Dr. Sarah has spoken very well about women empowerment. And the narrative out there is that the women have arrived. When we ask, are we there yet? They're saying, yes, the 1.5 should go. But when you look at the ordinary person, the ordinary woman, leave alone, every time we talk about women empowerment, then we look at the Speaker of Parliament, the Prime Minister, the Vice President. But you go to any company and you walk into the boardrooms, what do you see? It is the men sitting on the table still. Leave alone civil society. The women are represented in civil society, and in school we are seeing the girl child coming up, but also the numbers are not yet there. Because if you also go to the numbers, you realize that the school dropout, who drops out the most? Is it the boys or the girls? It is the girls. So it has not translated to the grassroots, and also in the company boardrooms.
Now Makerere University admits 51%.
Yes.
Female, and then 49.
And then 49 male. But still...
But that's the statistic of our population.
Our population has more women.
51% women.
Yes, but it used to be 28.
Yeah, it used to be
There is
imbalanced.
there. But it's
imbalance.
not yet to Hulu. That's what we are
But
saying.
we have more women in this country than men. And also the school dropout, if you go back to the statistics, let's use the numbers.
Yeah.
The numbers will actually tell you that there are more, okay, you start off with more girls, but they drop off.
And the
along the
challenges
way.
are known.
And the challenges are known.
Menstrual stigma.
Yes.
You know,
How
early
many
marriages,
girls can still
teenage
afford a pad?
pregnancies. You know.
Okay, then what are the empowered women like Ruth, Dr. Sarah, the speaker? What are the empowered women?
So you have a few
because
women.
You appreciate what these young girls are going
we
through.
have a few women up there that we peddle and we say, oh, they have arrived because Dr. Sarah has spoken, the Speaker of Parliament is there, you know. But what is around her? When you walk into that boardroom, who is there? Who are the decision makers? Did you care to look at NSSF? Who was on the table? Who was on the table? Where were the women?
They are even the board. You know, people kept
The
asking.
board. Yes.
The board, management,
and it's very easy to place, and every time you speak about women, the speaker or the president, but where are the real decision making processes? If you go to the Ministry of Health, who sits at the table? If you go to the Ministry of Education, if you go to companies, so women are still doing the low-income jobs of being the cleaners, and they're still the tea girl. Even you in here, I mean, I don't know, but when you think about someone who's going to send you a cup of tea, the tea girl, well, we even call them tea girls.
Of course.
The tea person, who do you think about?
She's
a girl. It's a tea girl. When you think, and now we are thinking about the oil sector. When you go into oil and gas, this lucrative sector that is going to bring so much money, where are the women on the table?
Isn't the head
It is very
Proskovia
masculine.
Nabanja?
The head of what?
The head of, I think, Sinop in
Yes,
Uganda?
you will have one, and then we
Proskovia
peddle
Nabanja.
them and say, oh, but she's one amongst how many? So we have to look at the numbers, but beyond the numbers. And then there's a time they were talking about, Ministry of Energy. When you go to these ministries, you're like, okay, where are the women? And then what? Even in us as lawyers, the women are looked at. Oh, you go to human rights, or you know, the professions or that women are very passionate about defending human rights. They're looked at as soft law. It's not, but really that is the womanness, the passion that I have for children and women and all these things make me go into this. And while men are running for the money, I'm running for
The
a
social,
change,
yeah.
the social aspects. And yet it's not recognized. We forget it. If you look at the local councils, how many LC chairpersons are women? That's why we even call them
Always have one or
LC
two.
chairman. There's never a LC chairwoman. Do you understand? It is all those things. But even at the local level, so we are not yet there. We have some women in places, but we have not yet arrived. How many women, if we talk about the constituency positions, how many women are able to go and run for the constituency position? So we end up going for the woman's seat. It is good for us. But even the powerful women, like Honorable Kidega, is stuck there. How many women are able to go for the constituency seat? Those are the issues. You know, it is a challenge because once you step there, they'll ask you how many children do you have? Where is your husband?
Go for your seat.
Yes. How
Go
are you?
for your woman's seat.
You have a special seat there. What makes you think that I cannot represent men and women? Do you understand? So all these issues bring us down. They continue to bog us down as women. Okay, Dr. Sarah spoke very well about it, so I just wanted to add my voice.
Yeah.
So
Our compliance
our
levels.
compliance. Uganda has ratified, out of the 9 core instruments, Uganda has ratified 8. The one we have not yet ratified is the one on enforced disappearances. Okay, so the UNCAT, ICCPR, this, you know, the CEDAW, all these instruments we have ratified. That is very good. But then after ratification, you note that our reporting has been very low. For the ICCPR, I think we are at 12 years late. Then the others we have been late for 7 years, and it's many things. We are late. And when we are late, that means we put into question how compliant are we. So if we commit as a country to be bound by particular instruments, we should be able to implement them and also ensure that we report on time. Because when you report, you actually you check yourself. It's an accountability mechanism. We've gone through the UPR. Unfortunately, the UPR, you can't be late. You have to be there. And I was happy Uganda I think, was very vigilant about reporting and coming up with a state report. We thank them for that. But how I wish all the recommendations we commit to through the different mechanisms are implemented. It is really absurd and unfortunate where after 5 years or even 10 years, we go back and we're in the same position.
Worse.
Or even worse, and we have not acted upon a recommendation or recommendations where we committed ourselves to address. It's really a shame. I mean, by the time you commit, you're like, this is what we want for our country. So let's prioritize these recommendations. Let us budget for them. Let us put mechanisms and processes and whatever into place so that we don't continue to embarrass ourselves because no one forces us, no one coerces us to ratify these instruments. So if we accept to be bound by them, let us actually use them for the good of our people.
All right, fair enough. Retired Major, I'm sure you have a plethora of comments to make regarding the rights of women, but also about our international compliance. But as you do that, the aspect of the role of international bodies like the United Nations in terms of enforcing these international or global conventions, do they have capacity, or do you think their work is limited by the principle of sovereignty, that member states on the international scene are equals and that they are sovereign, in that even when we ratify, we have to go ahead and domesticate these laws. So, and therefore, we are not exactly bound by these conventions that we ratify until we domesticate them. Now, Uganda takes a dual approach towards legislation of such conventions. So, 2 questions for me. One is our compliance. 2 is the role of international organizations in terms of enforcing international conventions. Then 3 is, do you think that at times Uganda and many African states are driven by the bandwagon effect. They end up ratifying things that they are not ready for, that they don't even understand, and that affects our compliance, affects their implementation.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to start with what the two eminent ladies have commented about. On the issue of women emancipation, I think the spirit, even when it was put in the Constitution, the spirit of empowerment is not, in my opinion, if I guess the spirit is not in position of responsibility. Responsibility and education was a means to an end. Office holding, first education, office holding is a means to an end. The end is for the lady to be economically empowered. In fact, I wish now a research could be done in economic terms to check the bank deposits. Are women now economically empowered for those who bank as they used to be? Is there an increase in savings and banking? Otherwise, education is not for the sake of education. The 1.5. Education is because a girl has to be educated to get a job. Okay? And even the position of responsibility, maybe for influence, but also to economically empower. So I wish to draw attention that education and position is a means. So we can't use means to judge the ends. We should now be checking. And by the way, there's a joke that around Fridays, it is men no, on Monday, if you see in a bank in the line, it is ladies who are depositing, men are withdrawing because they have used all their money over the weekend. And yet it is the ladies who are depositing. But a thorough research can be done. If 10 years ago, the bank deposit, the number of ladies who are banking have increased, or even those who are banking, if the amount of money has increased, so that we
Just a
assess.
question, Mr. Moderator.
Please.
Are you reducing the need to participate in decision making on a bank deposits?
No.
Bank balances?
Decision make no. I throw in the bank deposit with a sense of humor, but I am saying a research should be done if women are economically empowered. Education, position of responsibility is a means to an end. So are women now economically empowered? Because it is only when they're economically empowered that they can be women in their own right. If you make her a chairperson LC5 and she's not economically empowered, she will be as vulnerable as anything. Even if you make her a minister without high economic empowerment, she will be vulnerable like anything. So education, position of responsibility was just a means to an end. So I like to stop there. Now, we also should mention that as a matter of law, budgetary allocations are given to women to effectively carry out the aspirations and the activities. So we should be cognizant of that, that as a country, we have legislated that in every budgetary actions, please consider women. So this makes us go a long way.
Actually, that is the Equal Opportunities Commission's mandate.
Yes. So we have gone a long way as a country in that. Now, about the compliance, Uganda is to a big extent complying. Why do I say so? I say so because I have been on the other side seeing how other states are complying. I have had the opportunity to have all the 193 governments in the world appear before me to show compliance, including United States. So I am capable of comparing where Uganda is and where other countries are. The appearance before a UN body to see compliance comes out in a product called Concluding Observations. And it assesses a country article by article. Say if it is Convention on the Rights of the Child, they'll assess what is a child. Article 1, anybody below 18, do you comply there too? Article 2, Article 3. So article by article, in the product of concluding observations, Uganda has done very well. And I'm saying this because I compare with the other countries that I have seen. Now, We have also seen the compliance in domestication. Many laws have been domesticated. Immediately we do it, including Convention on the Rights of the Child, the CEDAW, and all this that we have done, we have domesticated. So that also is a proof of compliance. Then, this should translate to the welfare of a citizen. And we have seen it may be difficult to assess, but we all know that all this has translated to the welfare of a citizen. And that's why now you cannot do anybody anyhow. Now they will cite you a provision of international binding. So I like to say that having looked at the concluding observations of all the countries in the world, and by the way, human rights is so interrelated. If I'm on the Committee on the Rights of the Child, human rights are interrelated. You are not going to look at the convention on a child minus the mother's rights, minus the father's rights. Even under the convention, there's children of disability. There's a child girl, a girl child, everything. So whichever treaty body you are on, you have the ability to see all across the human rights. UPR is actually a consolidation of reports from all these other treaty bodies. So I am privy to that. You can check any concluding observations made again on Uganda, and you will see that every specific comment of UN is not way out that Uganda is so mad and Uganda is so bad, because they comment on article by article. Whether it is a report on CEDAW, that is on a convention against convention on discrimination. No. The ladies like putting it all discrimination. If you say discrimination against women, they are not happy. They say all forms. You must add that. So
it's not to the women. That's
CEDAW and everything.
That's the letter of the law.
The compliance is practical. You can check on the net on the concluding observation issued by UN on each and every international instrument. And it is not way weird that Uganda has violated. Finally, on the issue of reporting, it's a challenge to all African countries because you need technical experts, you need funding like from UNICEF, you need from Office of the High Commissioner. Countries like Sweden or Norway, if they're supposed to report on the 1st of January, whether New Year or what, the report is ready. I wish we could reach that. But that is a challenge to most African countries. And I'm saying this because I have had all countries appear before me. Now, your question is the role
of international organizations in terms of enforcing these, legislations.
You see, the enforcement is there, and that is a common question we used to have, that you're on this treaty body, are you biting? What do you do? And you're there just to discuss. The procedures of compliance is there. I gave you the example of Sudan. Before the Greater Sudan, I mean. Sudan was supposed to appear before the Committee on the Rights of the Child. Somehow, they did not report to a civil society claim that in Darfur, there was genocide. Okay? This is Committee on the Rights of the Child. Sudan didn't respond to that. Now, the procedure is if a claim is brought against you and you don't report, then that committee makes a report. The report goes to New York, okay, to third committee, and then from third committee finds it up to Security Council. Now, this led to the indictment of Bashir, okay? Because a committee has found out that there's genocide in this country. Then the committee says, oh, this is our finding. This report gets itself to Security Council. And you will find that there are many ways of indictment to Security Council. Either a complaint by a country like Uganda complain that Kony is outside our jurisdiction. Please indict him. That is a complaint from a country. But there's also a motion by Security Council, which is in the case of Sudan. So the enforceability is there. People don't seem to see it. Even the Lubanga case in Congo, it was a provision, a finding by a committee on the rights of the child that there is recruitment of children into the army. Please, relevant organ take note. So the committee which does the compliance on all these treaty bodies makes recommendation, but recommendation find itself somewhere. And that is what led to Bashir indictment through that. So about the signing as a bandwagon, treaties are negotiated. States are free to ratify and sign. But you're even free to make reservation. For example, most Arab worlds can, on Convention on the Rights of the Child, originally, where it says equality in gender, boy child and girl child, they made reservation. They say, no, for us, we have reservation of this. It means, therefore, that provision is not binding on you. So I have no reason to doubt that if the competency of African governments are there, those who participated in negotiation did negotiate. Those who ratified later discussed it. So they signed and ratified what they know. And therefore, nobody forced them. They should even be able to make reservations if they show wish in some particular provision. Therefore, in conclusion, I like to say these things are binding and they are biting. I have cited for you 2 cases which lead somebody to International Criminal Court. Only that sometimes we're silent, we don't know how the mechanism works, but it works. Uganda is doing very well. Check on the concluding observations on the net.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just to
Dr.
explain
Sarah.
that for every instrument that is reviewed, that is the committee is supposed to make concluding recommendations. And when you're in doubt about a particular treaty, you go to the general comments. The general comments then interpret. I just wanted to just...
Wow, very, very amazing. Dr. Sarah, many people have argued that the world has become a global village. My own opinion is that there are many villages around the globe. Why do I say this? Because I think member states are still reserved or intend to interest themselves in preserving their culture, norms, and values. The question that I'm asking you is leading towards I don't want to say internationally accepted, but there is a global movement on the rights of homosexuals, the rights of transgender, all right? So, but also you know that the Supreme Court decision of Roe versus Wade of the USA that has now legalized abortion. So the question is that are some of these rights that are being accepted by the Western world, from where we get part of our funding, how do you think this is going to affect our social construct as a people? Because the Africans believe that no, someone should not abort, someone should not, a man and a man should not be together. So globally, Western, rights accepted in their own way, being enforced on us as a people. I don't know, how do you anticipate this unfolding?
When the case of Roe versus Wade was reversed by the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court, the American president addressed media, and so this was a decision of 1973. So how many years are those? Almost 50 years. So you had the abortion rights reversed after 5 decades in the US, and now it's upon a state to legislate either whether for or against. And the women are saying you can't have control of our bodies. So, and maybe that takes us again to the debate of women empowerment. What is women empowerment? In basic terms is, women to have power and control over their lives. And that requires social empowerment, education empowerment, economic empowerment, political and psychological empowerment of women. And you cannot just use one indicator of economic to assess women empowerment. There are 5 indicators: social, educational, economic, political, and psychological empowerment. So that's why we have policies on mainstreaming, gender empowerment, and all the other efforts. So having said that, so if you say you are empowering a woman to take full control of their lives, then who determines what they can?
Even if it means
I'm
taking the life
I'm coming.
Because
so who determines what they can and what they come to do? Previously, where are we coming from? what injustices is the world seeking to address in terms of women. So we have had women being treated as second-class citizens globally for centuries, not just 1 year or 2 years. You had women not having voting rights in the US. You had and Europe. So you are trying to cover a gap of women being treated as second-class citizens in different forms and cultures. In Uganda, women could not eat chicken and goat meat. It's too sweet, and the men didn't want competition. So you have this, it might sound funny now, but this was the segregation. You had people saying you can't educate a girl, it's a waste of time because she's going to join another family. Let her just get married, give us cows to educate a boy. For centuries, you had people saying women cannot access power. So the dominant words of chairman, yes sir, they do not take into consideration that there is another gender. So this is what the world is seeking to address. And that's why there are indicators and there are targets under the Millennium Development Goals. We fell short of hitting the targets. We are likely to go through the same for the SDGs. The targets. That's why the whole world is saying, let's move. This must end. So, but as you said, the right to commit to take a life, we had discussed that at the beginning of the responsibility to protect. So you have no right to take your own life. The same way you don't have a right to take somebody else's life. Yeah, so that cannot now come into the women empowerment debate. We are saying, can't we first be at the same level? Yes, you can talk about women graduating, university quota. It's just for the first time that you have the 51-49% in admission. But does that cover the historical gap? We will still need more to produce an empowered woman in terms of education, to cover the gap of centuries of historical injustices. So that's the debate.
And also the narrative when he says women empowerment and brings about the abortion rights, so that, the communication is, oh, you want to empower them so that they kill our children. All that is very intentional. When people are arguing and speaking unbeknown to them, they're actually belittling particular movements or particular aspects. Because then for an ordinary person who hears or listens to Dr. Sarah will be like, oh, so you want me to empower these women so that they kill our children, so that they take a life. So, and I'm glad she has evaded it and just stuck to what the issue is. So, yeah.
Yeah, so don't create diversions.
So do you support abortion or not?
No. But you see, even in law, there are situations under which a person.
Which are acceptable legally. The mother's life is in trouble.
Yes. So, but the question is, it is my body. I know there was a debate on monologues and body autonomy. It's my body.
And somebody else.
Do you dictate on what I should do with my body or not?
No, but you see, doctor, when you are expecting a child, then it is now more than one body that you're carrying.
You see what the men where even they miss a point in that diversionary debate. What if I didn't tell you that I'm pregnant? What are you gonna do?
You know it.
But how are you going to know? It is even, that's how irrelevant it is. What if today I got pregnant and I don't tell anyone and I do whatever I want? What are you gonna do?
But you have the mens rea in you.
So, but no, I'm showing you how. I'm showing you how irrelevant it is.
But you see also, doctor.
So the first choice is for a woman.
You didn't get yourself pregnant by some Holy Spirit. There's a man
No. But there are also other means. So is it just a man now to make people pregnant? Please, so let's not go into that debate. Let's not divert into those debates.
Okay.
Let's stick.
Yes, but the question that I was putting to you precisely is that there is this international movement on, for example, LGBTQ. But again, Africans have their social values that they believe in, their cultures and norms. But also we have people who are citizens of this country. And in this case, they become minorities. who ideally, by now global standards, should have the right to be homosexuals. But then Uganda is saying, no, for us here, we don't acknowledge that as a right. So I don't know. Is there a contradiction in between there?
I know that Article 31, Clause 2 of the Constitution prohibits same-sex marriage. But that's where the Constitution stops. I don't think the Constitution went further to talk about anything other than marriages. And as a constitutional watchdog, I'm always careful to protect the Constitution as is. Away from that.
So you are against
No.
homosexuals?
I am quoting the Constitution.
Okay.
So away from that, there's a rhetoric that homosexual is an African, is alien. In my language, we have a vocabulary for homosexuals. They are called ebtingwa. So if it is alien, where did this word come from? And I found it there. In Uganda, they are called abasiazi. Who created these words?
Could have been created recently. Could have been created recently.
Two, when you go to actual science, they show homosexuals as an exception. If you want to use the legal terminology, exception to the main rule. And I know it is a difficult debate because of our African culture, but I think what we can't run away from is that we have indigenous words describing homosexuality. How they should be treated, I know the stigma, I know the politicization. Now we have a lot of political rhetoric. We can't even have sober debate to chant a way forward as a country because of the politicization. And I know they are going to be victims. Already in the NGO world, I saw 22 organizations. It is the up for closure. I'm sure in the coming years, regardless of what these organizations were registered to do or not and what they are doing, because I believe that in the regulation that Afanda which talked about, you cannot become an NGO unless you are a legal entity. So what were the founding objectives of these organizations? Who registered them? How were they licensed? And were their objectives in conformity with our laws of the land or not? Because anybody seeking to do work that is outside the laws should not be registered in the first place. So I know that the political rhetoric is going to be used for harassment. And you can watch this space. Political position are going to be branded homosexual. So that distortion, NGOs, if they want to cross CCG, they will come and say homosexual. So that rhetoric and the political capital that comes with it is what creates a distortion to the sober debate of this topic.
Wow, I've been signaled that our time is fast spent here, but it's only prudent that I give you a minute and a half each, 90 seconds, to give us your parting shots and your last word on the show. I'll begin with you, retired Major.
Why don't you start near you?
She's a guest, so I'll
anyway,
give her the last words.
I first want to comment by saying I don't want to enter into the debate, the women debate of abortion or not abortion, but I just want to say that some of us who have been interpreting international instruments, sometimes we go to the answered, how that provision was made. Which state said what when they were negotiating? There's a man called Dietrich who writes on the answered. For example, if you go to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, it's the Vatican during negotiation that inserted which made to the current definition of a child. Anybody below 18. Anybody below 18. Not 0 to 18. Meaning that it goes down up to conception, according to the Vatican. So the Vatican said, no, gentlemen.
People born when they are 9 months
let us not talk about, if you say the child is anybody born up to below 18, it means therefore you have cut out even an 8-month-old child. So the Vatican's proposition during the negotiation prevailed. The Vatican proposition is a proposition by states. So Vatican during negotiation proposed that it's safer for us to say a child is anybody below 18. And therefore, in the mind of the Vatican, they wanted to say, should you abort, then you would have killed a person. And that is how Vatican managed to convince the world.
How about the other member states?
Remember that CRC is the only instrument that has got universal ratification. Even USA, which is always guarded, it has reports on the protocol. So that is, I just like to remind the ladies that is the position of the children, the child.
How old is you see, if that was the case,
Which was the case?
If that was the case, every child will be born if they are when they are already 9 months old, would count the time in the.
But that is the definition of a child. Anybody below 18. Okay. Now, on the issue of words, Sarah seems to think that some words mention this and that. I like to say that you have to study when did that word come into existence, because words develop. Did you know that the English dictionary now has the word kabaka? And in the dictionary it is defined the traditional leader of a tribe in Uganda called Uganda.
How old has the kabaka been?
Yeah, so words are not permanent. So we can't now say because a particular word is there, something is there. I just like to say words, language is not hard and frozen. Language is the most developing. Very soon, even in the English dictionary, you will find the word border. A motorcycle mode of transport used in Uganda or in East Africa. That will be the definition. So words develop so quickly. Now, my conclusion here is that on human rights is a matter that concerns all of us. Nobody in the state, nobody in government, nobody in the ruling party celebrates violations. And we should take as sanctity Article 44. As a government, we promise to do that. And details need to be worked about the protective mechanism. And it is work in progress, but we like to promise Ugandans that NRM as a party, in the manifesto it gave to the people, in the governments that it formed after winning elections, we are strongly committed to human rights, and the president has pronounced again and again, and officers who don't abide by that, we will be handle them according to the law. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Sarah.
I think for me as a country, we need to reflect seriously on the situation that was prevailing before the murder of Archbishop John Ndlovu. The situation of kidnaps, the situation of torture, the situation of killings, the situation of detention without trial, and our beloved Archbishop Emeritus John Ndlovu, may he rest in peace, was murdered for having taken a very firm stand against extrajudicial killings and gross human rights violations by Idi Amin's government. He was murdered with 2 others immediately after delivering a protest note. If we want to celebrate the life of Archbishop John Ndlovu, we should stop the grand posturing, deal with the causes that led to his death, speak clearly against kidnaps, torture, killings under President Museveni's government today. When he gets up to speak about John Ndlovu, remind him that he's doing the same acts that Idi Amin was doing at that time. Call him out, because as a president, he has a responsibility to protect, and he's failing in that duty.
Yes, Ruth.
Oh, thank you. First of all, it's been very interesting to sit with these two. Yes, and it was beautiful to listen to them. And they're all very passionate about what they believe in. And so we thank you for the space. But for me, I think it's very important for all Ugandans and all people in Uganda to love this country. we cannot get a spare country. I cannot go to Kenya or Sudan and get citizenship just like that. We can make this country better. How about bettering our country by the leaders of this country looking out for its people, respecting the people and their dignity and their property, and the people respecting each other, being each other or the brother's keeper, and ensuring that this country is for us all. Just seeing people littering, you're thinking, okay, do you really love your country? I mean, it can be as small as that. And then it can come to torture. How come you are fine with subjecting another to such inhuman and heinous act? So whatever it is, let us be our brother's keepers. Let us respect the law. Let us respect human rights. Human rights is everything and everything. So let us love the people in Uganda and love our country. If we do that, then some of these issues will not be rising. Let us grow. We are 50 years, 50 how many years old? 60 years old. Really,
Retirement age.
that is past retirement. So basically, let us work for the good of this country in whatever sector, whether you are a market woman, whether you are a businessman, whether you are a politician, whether you are whatever profession, we can make a difference for each other and for this country. I thank you.
Wow, what a way to end. Thank you very much, retired Major. Thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Dr. Ruth as well, for sparing the time to be on the Citizens Chat Show this Friday. And to the viewers, it's always a pleasure making a date with you every Friday at 2 p.m. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like our page. But above all, enjoy our content. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.